My lords, today we are going to discuss the Birch World. In principle, a Birch World is an artificial construct, a gigastructure if you will. They are a specialized type of shell world built around a supermassive black hole. A world such as this can easily support multitudes of layers. They are intended to be lived upon, or rather inside, and are true marvels of habitat engineering that can house essentially an endless quantity of people. The layers are connected by spires, allowing for transport between the individual layers or deeper into the sphere. For reference, if we wanted to build one around the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, it would have to be roughly 1 light year in radius in order for us to experience 1g, or Earth's gravity. You will wonder then how we came to discover one, dead and decaying. We've excavated it and found records relating to an empire who found themselves living on it, and I shall detail their account for you now. The first expedition. We knew precious little of our ancient past until a few centuries ago. We thought this planet was all there was, an impenetrable barrier beneath us, and another held 1,000 kilometers above our heads by great spires. The rolling stars would trace a path along the sky to mark day and night. But that all changed. A massive asteroid impact shattered our assumptions and punched a hole straight through the upper barrier, showing us the universe outside. Using the closest spire for support, we built a tower in order to reach this breach in our world. And we took our first faltering steps into the wider galaxy. The ancient starports and dry docks we found on the outer surface changed everything for us. As our first spacecraft travelled outward, we realised that our home was not natural at all. Rather, it was a colossal artificial sphere, one which was clearly in a state of disrepair. Finding no more answers above, we are now planning a great expedition to hunt for a way into the theoretical layers below us. And today marks the departure day of our first major exploratory operation, with the hope to discover a functional transit spire, and hopefully through it the origins of our homeworld. While many attempts have been made in the past to map the regions far from our homeworld, they have been comparatively small and poorly equipped, and ultimately found little of use in the vast wilderness. Now that we have seen the structure from space and understand its true immensity, it is imperative that our explorers have the equipment and supplies they need for excursions of such an epic scale. Our first expedition leader, Dr. Chan, has been assigned to spearhead the operation. He will lead a combined land, air and sea force large enough to travel the extreme distances required, while maintaining most of their own supply chain. We don't know what they'll find out there, but we hope that they can at least shed some light on the true nature of this ancient structure that we live upon. While this was happening, we began to explore the space around our solar system, and we found several star systems that contained what would appear to be automated surveillance drones. They appeared in 3 choke points surrounding our homeworld, cutting us off from the wider galaxy. We wondered if this was a coincidence, or if someone placed them here deliberately. Perhaps the makers of this world. We have begun receiving reports from our expedition leader, and they report that the explorers have discovered the remains of a large settlement, one that was arranged much like our own around one of the great supports between the layers, which sadly for us appears now non-functional. Between the worn down state of the ruins and how many of the structures appear to have been entirely buried, archaeologists estimate that the settlement has been abandoned for around 200 years. Furthermore, according to the expedition's head archaeologist, the civilization that once lived here was well established and had a significant level of industrial infrastructure. Not much is left to help us understand what they were like, as sadly no remains have been discovered, and all storage media found appears to have decayed beyond all recognition. All we can say for certain is that these people had a different body to our own, as their tools and fixtures are quite alien in design. The expedition leader, Dr. Chan, has suggested that we established a forward base of operations at this site, as the mystery could become the subject of a long-term study. She also suggests that we could use some of the less interesting parts of the site to gather resource, either through recycling or land redevelopment. The council decided to attempt to recover the settlement's power plants and try and boost our energy output. The discovery of the extinct civilization, which seems to have followed a similar technological trajectory to our own, has left us with a sense of uncertainty about our own impermanence. We have the advantage of being able to access the space beyond the structure's outer shell, but have yet to find a single functional spire through which to reach the lower levels. It is possible that none of them remain in an operational state, in which case we may never achieve our goal. However, we feel as a people we must redouble our efforts, and the next expedition will go further, learn more, and be better able to repel anything that might threaten their mission. Thus, the second expedition has been launched. The second expedition. Roughly a decade after the first, the second major expedition was launched into the unknown. Once again, we set out to find a functional spire to access the lower layers of the structure. Building upon our previous findings, our explorers will embark from a forward base, established among the ruins discovered by the first expedition. The expedition leader is Dr. Kendra, and her team of explorers are ready to take on any challenges which stand before them. And once again, we embark into the unknown. Not long after setting out, Dr. Kendra reported that the expedition was picking up radio signals, indicative of an industrialized society, and has sent several camouflage scouts ahead of the main convoy to investigate further. From what we understand so far, these aliens appear to be plantoid, with the technological level significantly behind our own. They have many cities, several of which are built around spires, with structures built partway up their exterior. They appear to be primarily used for launching fixed-wing aircraft over long distances. There's no indication that they have detected our explorers, and every effort is being made to keep it that way. Despite our attempts at subterfuge, it would appear that we were spotted. Dr. Kendra has sent an urgent transmission stating that the plantoid species, which the expedition was observing, has learned of our presence. One of the Primitive's aircraft flew an unusually long distance in their direction, passing within our blackout zone and seeing the main convoy directly. The aircraft managed to escape and transmitted a distress signal, and soon after, we received a radio signal transmitted directly towards the convoy, requesting an audience. We granted an audience, and we met with a plantoid who stated they were from the Lilia Rubin Society. Their leader was Purple Flower, the Grand Marshal, and they requested that we stated our business, and further stated that they wished for a peaceful discussion, but were prepared to defend themselves if necessary. We were upfront and honest. We told them about our situation. After all, they were more or less in the same situation we were, and we told them that we saw a functional spire. They quickly responded, telling us that we wouldn't find a functional spire around here. None of the ones that they had encountered had responded to any of their attempts to access and open them, and had proven impervious to forced entry. They acknowledged that we had come far, and were clearly more capable than them. They stressed that our level of technology worried them, and made it quite clear that they were concerned what our actions could lead to having discovered them. Despite the fact that our people were xenophobic by nature, we decided that a trade agreement of information and resources with these aliens would be beneficial for both peoples. They wisely accepted, and following a period of negotiation, a trading partnership has been successfully formed with their society. Our nations will remain separate, but traders will set up and travel between the lands, and plans for a long-distance transit system are being drawn up. The third expedition. It would appear that we're able to complete these expeditions roughly every 10 to 20 years, and the time has now come for the third expedition to strike out into the unknown in a continued search of a functional spire. We have learned much in the years since we started our mission, and new developments in propulsion and technology will allow our explorers to go further and see further than ever before. This time, our convoy will be directed by the expedition leader, Joshua Hartwell, and we will continue on from the distant forward base established by the second expedition. Dr. Hartwell soon reported that our explorers may have finally found a functional transit spire. After several thousand failed attempts, The spire has shown signs of retaining intact internal systems, and we hope it will allow our passage to the lower levels. But first we need to be able to supply it with enough power for it to properly reawaken. This of course led to a decision. Given the amount of power that would be required, we may have to make sacrifices, but we came to the decision quickly. Although it would take both a long time and a significant amount of power to rouse the ancient machine, it must be done. We must find out what is below us. And soon it was done. Dr. Hartwell reported that after a hefty infusion of energy, the ancient transit spire has been reactivated. Our hypothesis is that the spires were once used not only for support, but also transport between the levels, and this has been confirmed, and our explorers will now have access to the layers below our own. A small contingent has been chosen to find out how far we can go. Small, both for the safety of the expedition as a whole, and due to the constraints of how much the spires can move at one time. Our people will descend into the abyss. Having travelled downward for several days, our explorers report that the spire's transit pod has encountered a blockage which prevents further progress. Along the way, they were able to access only 3 of the 10 of the layers that we passed, 2 of which appeared to be entirely devoid of features, containing only an airless empty space between the shells. The 3rd layer was different, however. Initial reports suggested it was filled with machinery, potentially industrial in nature, and it had an atmosphere of inert gases, presumably as a thermal transfer medium. Dr. Hartwell suggested that we set up a forward base at the foot of the spire on the 3rd level to secure the position and have a site from which to conduct further exploration. Our crews are attempting to salvage anything further of interest. The 4th expedition. When the 3rd expedition successfully activated the spire and travelled down to the machine layer, we estimated that the explorers had travelled less than 1% of the way to the structure's core. However, since then, new measurements of the effect of gravity and the flow of time on the machine layer have led us to revise our calculations of the structure's density. Based on the density and observations of other galaxies, we now believe that the structure may be built around a supermassive black hole, with the machine layer placed more than 30% of the way from the outer surface to its event horizon. This new estimate drastically reframes how much progress we have made, and it suggests that it may be possible to reach the core much sooner than we initially expected. The 4th expedition will be led by Giselle Savoya, and will focus on finding another spire, but this time on the machine level, with the hope that it will be capable of taking us even closer to our goal. During exploration, the 4th expedition reported that they encountered a large facility, which may have been an automated manufacturing facility. It appeared to be remarkably intact compared to the other structures that we had encountered on our journey, and the explorers conducted a thorough investigation to determine whether it could be repaired. The results of this came back quickly. The ancient manufacturing complex appeared to be intact enough to restore, and we believe it would obviously be beneficial to do so. With a little elbow grease, it will work again. The 4th expedition also uncovered something else. The rough layout of the information networks were running through the structure, and with this information, we could greatly focus our efforts on aiming for areas likely to contain important nodes on the network. The search of space is still huge, but we now have a map of sorts, and in time we hope to learn the secrets of this world. The 5th expedition. Since the conclusion of the 4th expedition, significant progress has been made in the interpretation of the network map that we discovered. Multiple candidate sites for important nodes have been plotted, and this new expedition will travel to the nearest. Expedition leader Dr. Wu will lead our explorers to this potential location and determine whether our predicted models are correct. We still don't know what kind of form these nodes will take, or even if they will have a physical presence that we can reasonably interact with, but confirming whether or not our suspicions are correct will be worth the expenditure. Dr. Wu quickly reported that the expedition reached the approximate area of the predicting network node, and they encountered an unusual looking structure built into the main trunk of one of the machine level spires. The spire itself appeared to be responsive, so accessing the strange structure hopefully won't be an issue, but nevertheless our explorers proceed with caution. Once inside the unusual spire, the explorers found what appeared to be some sort of control center, and apparently it was dedicated to managing the flow of resource and power through the structure systems. Our researchers postulated that if we can crack the protocol used in the network, we should be able to take control of some of the systems and finally bring the structure back to life. It took an entire 12 months to crack the protocol, but we have finally unveiled the network. A great web extends out before us, a constellation of 100 billion tiny stars joined together by the fine threads of data. Nearly all were dimmed, with only a few scattered points flickering, holding out against the darkness. This is our structure's digital essence, its true shape. And it's beautiful. But it is dying. The local nodes are somewhat intact and limp along in a low power state, unable to properly organize themselves without the guiding hand of the network at large. It would appear that it is falling into such a state of disrepair that the whole structure appears to be slowly decaying. The energy required to save it would be far beyond anything we can provide. But if we could tap the source and bring the structure's heart back to life, we could just coax it back into saving itself. In the meantime, the trickle of power available to us should be more than enough to restart some of the automated systems in the nodes closest to our homes. Despite the gravity of the situation, today is a day to celebrate, as the first step has been taken in establishing our custodianship of the structure. We now understand the basics of how it works, and we know what we must do to fix it, at least in the abstract. Frustratingly, these discoveries have done nothing to explain our own part in the structure's storied history. The control center interfaces were so adaptive to the presence of our explorers that we can't tell if their creators were even remotely similar to us. Regardless, the automated systems which we brought back online in our homeland have revolutionized all levels of our operations and have greatly expanded our output. The 6th expedition. The 5th expedition showed us that our true goal lies in reviving the heart of the structure and bringing its power generation systems back online. As such, the 6th expedition will set out to find this heart. The network map that we recovered from the control center on the machine layer has allowed us to pinpoint a distant spire, which hopefully will allow us access to the deeper levels. From there, things get less certain, but there are a few likely locations for a command center to guide us further. Expedition leader Birch will lead our explorers into the lower layers with the hope to establish another forward base of operations. The 6th expedition soon reported that the transit spire was successfully reached, and as before, a group of explorers were sent ahead of the main convoy as scouts. This time a single layer was accessible, where the explorers were immediately greeted by a blizzard. Extended observations suggest that this layer is full of ice and snow, with a huge storm system rolling through the landscape nearly continuously. The adverse conditions may pose some problems for the expedition, but they are well prepared and remain highly motivated. While travelling through the storm-swept Arctic layer, our explorers have encountered multiple abandoned settlements. The settlements are appearing far more commonly than we would expect on our home layer, and each was seemingly built by a different culture, all at various levels of technological development. Curiously, none of them seem to have been prepared for this kind of extreme weather, which led the expedition leader to suggest that their abandonment may be due to a shift in the environmental conditions sometime in the last few centuries. There is a possibility that such a shift was caused by the deterioration of the structure's environmental control systems, and perhaps we could fix this in the future. The former inhabitants, however, are long gone. The expedition reported that following a particularly intense blizzard, they were forced to retreat into a canyon system, but in doing so stumbled across something quite interesting. The canyon that they found themselves in cut through a series of large caves, which, due to their shelter positions, may be a fantastic location for a forward base. Additionally, the caves appear to host a rich underground ecology, with many species of lichen surviving through chemosynthesis, fueled by a gas vent. If we are to set up a base here, we can either harvest the lichen or use the gas wells to directly generate energy. Given that we have matter replicators, we decided to trap the gas from the wells, for we can never have too much energy. The 7th expedition. Aided by readings taken from the Arctic layer and established during the last expedition, further analysis of the structure network map has given us a solid lead on the location of a second command center. The 7th expedition will be headed up by Dr. Kyoto, and we set out from the forward base with the goal of reaching and securing this command center. The 7th expedition soon reported that the explorers reached their destination. Initially, they were unable to find anything, but eventually they came across a large artificial structure at the bottom of a frozen lake, only a few kilometers from the arrival point. It's unclear whether this structure is another command center, as it appears to be significantly larger than the one that we found on the machine level, and this one is not attached to a spire. Preparations to send a group down into the sunken structure have already begun. When our explorers entered the structure on the lake bed, they were hoping to find another control center. What they found, however, was far more localized and potentially more directly useful for our own purpose. This sunken facility appears to be an observation station, connected to thousands of surveillance posts, though most are now sadly offline. It would appear that this was some sort of grand experiment to study the development of primitive civilizations, and this was the nerve center for the operation. From what we can understand, this level was not always icy, lending credence to the environmental collapse hypothesis. Even in its rundown state, the observatory still has a large array of intact computing hardware, and we may be able to repurpose it for our own use with little work. The 8th expedition. Our failure to locate another control center during the 7th expedition has led in multiple ways to further understanding the structure's network map. Firstly, additional readings from the site of the observatory have allowed us to narrow some of the candidate sites down. And secondly, the observatory itself has provided some of the computing power required to refine our models. The 8th expedition is to be led by Chowta and will travel to the most likely candidate site yet. The 8th expedition reported that they have arrived at their destination, but there is a particularly heavy storm bearing down on the convoy's location. They have made visual contact with an artificial structure, which they hope is the command center we're looking for. It is attached to a spire like the first, but the shape is significantly different, being far larger and yet simpler somehow. Once the storm passes, the exploration of the structure will commence immediately. The storm took several days to pass, and our explorers poured in, but were quickly at a loss. The layout of the structure they were sent to explore simply makes no sense. It's a conundrum. Corridors end abruptly, and there are imperfect flat surfaces without apparent purpose. Live power conduits terminate in ways that could not possibly form a closed circuit, and the few signs that we can still discern point towards puzzling alcoves and end in dead ends. The expedition leader suggests there must be more here than meets the eye, and we should continue to hunt for clues to the method behind the madness. Sadly, this hunt went on for several decades. All it took, however, to see these designs in the right light was our discovery of the concept of tetra-dimensional engineering. And as our understanding of dimensions and physics grows, the mysteries behind the control hub and its peculiar design dwindled day by day. It is now obvious to even the casual inspection by our researchers that its structure is four-dimensional, which in retrospect is an expected design decision. Given our understanding of tetradimensional engineering, it now shouldn't take us long to gain access. And indeed it did not. Within only a year of our understanding of tetradimensional engineering, we are now receiving reports from the 8th expedition that repairs on the structure began and were completed. The systems maintaining its disjointed four-dimensional manifold have been restored, and we can now ask to access the space within. And inside, our explorers found exactly what we were looking for, a major command hub. From here, we'll be able to restart the structure's repair systems and begin the process of restoration. However, before that, we must revive the structure's heart. The command hub is receiving a flow of energy and raw material barely enough to maintain the structure, even in its current state. So we must go down even further. We must travel to the supermassive black hole and repair the great gravity bores and collectors hanging above the event horizon. We're nearly there. The most important part of this is still ahead of us, but with the control hub restored, we now have a much higher degree of control over the structure's systems. Despite the extremely low power levels throughout the network, we can redirect energy and materials from less important areas to our homeworld and revive yet more of the automated systems. The gains to productivity are assured to be significant, and we expect that they will be even greater once the structure is fully restored. The 9th expedition. Since the reactivation of the control hub during the 8th expedition, our researchers have been scouring the structure's network plan to find an extraction rate to focus our efforts on. Nearly all of these plans have failed, or are too essential to their local systems to disable. This makes repairs a tricky proposition. In this state, the whole structure may as well have only had a few centuries left before catastrophic failure. And it's a terrifying proposition, but one which makes our mission all the more important. Expedition leader Lowe will head up the operation to seek out and repair the gravity bore and collector system, deemed the most suitable for restoration. We hope that this will be the final piece of the puzzle. As our explorers complete their descent and enter the final lowest layer of the structure, they are struck with awe, because before them is an endless forest of collection equipment dangling down into the depths. Below them, the infinite inky depths stretch out. It's cold here, and a deafening silence presides over the cage with this black hole at the heart of the structure. Barely 100 kilometers separates the expedition from the rapidly spinning event horizon, a number which seems laughably tiny compared to the black hole's immensity. The scale and precision of the engineering required to build something like this is truly mind-boggling, and we are humbled to be its inheritors. It was, however, good news. The expedition leader reported that our explorers reached their destination. The extracting array was one of countless others, and it was a great gravity bore similar to our own matter decompressors. While others were visibly damaged or simply motionless, this one showed signs of being at least minimally functional. We hoped the restoration process would be relatively straightforward, and began repairs immediately. Fortunately, we were correct. The technology was indeed similar to our matter decompressors, and the repair on the gravity bore was soon completed. With this first new stream of matter and energy, we believe that we can kickstart the automatic repair systems, which will eventually bring the structure back to full working order. All that now remains is to wait for the preliminary repairs to be completed, and then we feed in the advanced materials required to finish the job. The final step. 207 years ago we began this journey. The last expedition, the 9th, successfully repaired an extraction array at the heart of the great structure that we call home. Since then, we have carefully been directing repair systems to focus on transport and distribution infrastructure in preparation for our final step of the process. To fully revive the structure, we will need to feed it a significant amount of advanced materials. This, however, was done. When we first learned of the universe beyond our skies, it was hard to believe that our planet was anything other than natural. We set out to explore, to learn its true nature. We never expected that it would be so neglected, so close to collapse. Today, however, we witness the revival of our world. Countless machines work in concert to make up a whole grand symphony of engineering, so vast and wondrous that we can scarcely believe that it's possible. Once this world was a cradle of civilization, turned into a historical preserve, this structure lives once more. How will we use it to shape our destiny? And that, my lords, is the end of their story. We found their Birch World in an ironic state of disrepair. If their last few sporadic reports are to be believed, this empire was wiped out in an attempt to defend their galaxy from a synthetic race of block-like aliens. In any case, the cycle of the galaxy, it would seem, continues. Thanks for watching, folks. If you want to hear about the block-like aliens, I suggest clicking the video on screen now. And thanks as ever to the creators of the Gigastructural Engineering mod, Ilawini, and a special mention to TTFT Cuts, who I believe wrote this event chain.